Attention audience, the rest of this evening's
Go crypto investing, and we're going to start at congress.gov. This is where you can look at any law that's on the books, any law that they're trying to get on the books, and any statute that they've changed, etc. And this is H.R.794, Climate Emergency Act of 2021. This is part of what Joe Biden's trying to do. They're trying to declare a climate emergency when there's not. This is some of the restrictions that the government is trying to get. You can see it's introduced, it's not passed. Its latest action was 2/5/2021. But this is some of the stuff that they're already trying to get passed, and this is why they're trying and they're demanding the government or the president does this via executive order, because these charlatans are trying to oust you. And Mr. Levin of Michigan, I hate that guy. He's been in there for longer than I've been alive. He needs to go. But they use the government scientists that are, let's just say, less credible, reputable, and knowledgeable as the government health administrators that were trying to tell you what to do during COVID. They had not the slightest clue. They lied. They misled. They used fear to try to push their agenda, not actually what was in the best interest of the people during a quote-unquote pandemic, right? And you can see the act to require the president to build, you can look it up. This is the website to go to look that up, right? And it is H.R.794 Climate Emergency Act of 2021. When you hear them talking about this right now, to require the president to declare a national climate emergency under the National Emergencies Act for other purposes. And there's the people that have sponsored the bill. There's a bunch of charlatans on there. Declare national emergency. It enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives in the United States of America and Congress assemble. Section 1, short title. The act may be cited as a national climate emergency or Climate Emergency Act of 2021. Congress follows the following. The years 2010 to 2019 were the hottest on record. Global atmospheric conditions of the primary global warming pollutant carbon dioxide, which that's their opinion based on this man, James Hansen. That's where they go, where they get all their information. They go to Dr. James Hansen. He's a big scumbag. He's a government bureaucrat, and it's all politically motivated on what they're trying to do, where they're trying to bring us back essentially into the 18th century, where they don't want us to have a lot of power. They don't want people driving cars. They don't want us to be doing anything. They want us in little areas and shit boxes, right? And they use all this as fear porn. The 1930s were much, much hotter than any of the years and droughts we've had recently, right? When they show you wildfire statistics, they say, oh, the West wildfire is the highest on record. Last year or 2 years before that, when it was every day. Well, it was only the highest on record, and the record they're using, which they started keeping track on their records in 2000. That's the records they're going off of. 2000, not very long ago. I was born before that, right? If you look at the historical record when they do data for hundreds of thousands of years, it's at near lows for out there, below average, not record lows, but the year that they were saying it was an all-time high, because their records only go back to 2000, right? That they're using the state all time. How can you have all time and then say down below data goes back to 2000 to present? How is that all time? That should say highest on record since our data set became online in 2000, but you should have the whole, if you want all time, you got to go back to all the records that we have. It's just insanity, right? And that's the kind of stuff they try to do back in the 18th, 17th, 16th. Fire is part of Earth. That's part of Earth's internal climate control. The Earth itself regulates its thermostat. If it gets a little too warm, right? Usually it's because the upper atmosphere is cleaner, because there's less clouds, less volcanic activity to put fine particulate matter up into the atmosphere, right? And if you have less volcanoes over a few decades, right, and you have less water vapor going into the out of the Central Pacific and spread out up into the atmosphere because you have a colder ocean for a few decades, right? You're going to get warmer, because you got less clouds. If you have dry air and the oceans are cold, they put less water vapor up, and they release less water vapor out of the ocean that gets up into the atmosphere, that starts and produces clouds, and then the clouds move, and then it rains, right? So they have less of that, so more of the sun's direct sunlight gets in and gets absorbed into the big bodies of ocean. When you have 3/4 of the Earth as an ocean, if the sun's radiation gets stored in the oceans, and then it gets released slowly over time when it releases, when you have El Niños and whatever. But when you have less of those things, you get warmer over a decade, a century, right? Because there's decade-long patterns that the Earth goes on, cyclical. There's centuries, multi-century, right? And the Earth will regulate that itself. Then if you get too warm, the oceans start to warm up. You get more El Niños, where it's pumping all of that extra water vapor into the atmosphere because of an El Niño. It forces that out, right? And then what does that do? It pushes up into the atmosphere, and you get more clouds, more rain, right? Then volcanoes start going off. Volcano eruptions go in key areas in cyclical, decadal cycles on Earth, and you start getting in a hyper, when both of those things act together, where you're getting lots of El Niños pumping water vapor into the atmosphere for 2 or 3 decades, where the Pacific gets warm, and then say you coincide that with 100 years of hyper high volcanic activity in the high atmosphere, and the stratosphere gets a lot of fine particulate matter up there. It starts to block more and more of the sun's rays. You get more and more rain. It eventually cools off the planet, right? It's the same thing up in the Arctic. If the oceans get too warm up in the Arctic, or around the Arctic edge, it pumps more water vapor up, which is going on right now in the Pacific, and you get more snow over top of the Arctic. And then that snow melts, and it runs off into the oceans, the North Atlantic, and it cools the North Atlantic. You have a North Atlantic oscillation up there, right? And that goes warmer and colder cycles. And when it gets too warm for too long, all that extra water vapor starts to pump a lot of snow, which we've had in the Northern Hemisphere in the wintertime. It's been snowing at a rapid pace every year the last 20 years. It melts. It runs off into the North Atlantic Ocean and the Arctic Ocean. It cools the North Atlantic down, and it goes the other way, and then it'll get drier up there, right? But these scientists are trying to base law and essentially put us back into the 20th century, or in the 18th century. You can see a rising 2 to 3 parts per million a year. C must reduced to not more than 350 parts per million, and likely lower, if humanity wishes to preserve a planet similar to which civilization developed and which life on Earth is adapted, according to former National Aeronautic and Space Administration climatologist Dr. James Hansen. And like the meteorologists say, they came up with climatologist because these people couldn't predict the weather, so they moved into a new made-up thing, climatology, right? Climate scientists have observations, climate change impact, including ocean warming, ocean acidification, floods, drought, wildfire, and extreme weather, demonstrated that a global rise in 1.5 Celsius, blah, 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 2008. And these are the same people that predicted back in the 80s that New York would be under 20 feet of water by 2000. Then by 2020 again, they said the Arctic sea ice and Greenland were going to collapse in on itself, and that was going to cause it. And that was already supposed to happen forever, right? Oh, this is a joke, and you guys need to read into this, because there's a lot of things that they want to make illegal that are legal now, and a lot of things they want to make hyper expensive via taxation, saying you can't do this. And if they declare a national emergency, the president could say you can't go to work or you can't drive your car on Tuesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays because this is a climate emergency, just like they did with COVID, right? It's a very dangerous thing they're trying to do, and they're using fear tactics and fear porn, and they're just flat out lying to you, right? So you should read this bill. I'm going to start showing you more and more bills and policies that are going to negatively affect the quality of life for the average American person, right? It's just going to do that, and you guys need to really understand what they're saying when they talk about sustainable life, sustainable development, right? And then we'll do more on a series on this later on today, and then we'll give you an update on the Bitcoin price, right? And if we look at the Bitcoin price, the Bitcoin price is falling like we thought. I should have took a short on it the other day and stayed in it, because you can see the Bitcoin price is now bouncing. But look at this. It's come all the way down right to where we thought, and it got rejected that we were talking about up here. You can see this. And over the weekend, we were saying it looks like it's topping out here, and then the underneath target would be down here at about the 19,200 to really this a lower support right here at 20,270, and you can see it's almost came right down to it. That's a fantastic trade. If anybody took that trading opportunity on Bitget, congratulations. And now the next bounce point you would look at would be somewhere over here if it's going to continue the pattern. But what you got to watch out for is this is a bearish continuation pattern, and the technical target is down there at 12,000. And the Joe Biden talks this week, and the Fed talks interest rate hikes, we could have a big breakdown.